Hey, what's up guys? And welcome back in to the garage. Now in today's video, I'm going to be highlighting the replacement of an old outdated function in our third generation Toyota 4Runners, and that's the ashtray. Now some of you guys out there in 2025 might still be using the ashtray in the rear passenger area, and if you are, hey, it's a judgment-free zone, man. I'm like Planet Fitness. But if you're not like me, then that area of your center console is just completely wasted, wasteful, non-functional, not helpful. Well, the people at TEQ Offroads have come up with a really awesome solution, and that is a 12-volt USB power panel. So in this video, you'll see me go through the steps that it takes me in order to successfully install this power panel, and you'll see how I chose to install the wiring on my third generation 4Runner for a clean, professional installation. Now with that said, you're also going to see some hurdles that I went through with my center console bracket, which is now a discontinued part. And I chose to leave that in this video because I wanted to show you guys that things do happen. Mistakes, issues, snapped rusted bolt heads, things happen in the process of your installation that you can't control, but you can go past it with some ingenuity and creativity. And I hope you guys will see that in this video. So as always, thank you all so much for stopping by. I appreciate your likes, your subscriptions, your comments. Leave them for me. Let them know how you think this installation went. And let me know if you're gonna pick one of these USB power panels up for your ride. As always, thanks so much, and I'll catch you guys next time. All right, guys, so here we are, and we are ready to unbox our center console USB 12-volt power panel from TEQ Offroad. I'm super excited about this, so let's get after it here. First thing we've got is this pretty sick decal here. That's a nice sticker, man. I'm always a sucker for that rainbow effect, so we'll sit that right over here. And we've got some packaging material there. And now let's get to the star of the show here. There it is. Now this is made of billet aluminum, and I can tell you right off the bat that I am extremely impressed with the weight of this product. This is a one-piece product, as you can see, and that's one of the reasons I went with this. There are other options on the market for this center console USB upgrade in our third gen 4Runners, but a couple of things. Number one, I love the manufacturing of this, and number two, I love the look. And man, let's just be honest, aesthetics are important. So that is actually even better than I expected it. Super cool. All right, next up here we've got looks like we've got these 90-degree connectors, which we will absolutely have to use for this application. The instructions go into more detail on that. And then we have this, which I also purchased. Now, this is not a requirement to purchase this from TEQ. You can purchase your own from a different source of your choice. However, to me, it just made more sense to purchase it straight from the source of TEQ. And so that's what I did. So that's the collar, and here is our plug-in source here, and I'm super excited about this. I actually really liked the way this one looked as well. To give us a preview here, that is how it's going to look when we're all done and finished. And what a nice look that is, man. How clean is that installation? So super excited about this, guys. I absolutely can't wait. I have passengers in the back of my third gen 4Runner quite often. I carry around my kids, their friends, and other passengers. And man, that ashtray is outdated and it is never used. So here we go. This is our unboxing. Now let's talk about the electrical components, the wiring and things that you're going to need on top of these components to get the job done. So here are some of the components that we're going to need, and really important ones to get our job done today. Now, as you look at the installation instructions that TEQ provides, they give you a couple of different options that you can go with in order to install the center console USB power panel. However, this is the way we're going to do it because I prefer a cleaner installation like this, and I don't mind taking my time to do it what I feel like is the right way. So I'm going to show you guys what I'm using. And so we're going to be tapping into our fuse panel, which is under the kick panel, the driver's side. So you're going to need an ATA circuit here, which is what we have, or a fuse tap. We also have some 15 amp mini fuses here, and that's because we're going to be tapping into a 15 amp circuit. So you're going to need those. We've got some 18 gauge wire. I've got red and black here in the shop. Obviously I use two different colors if we have a power and a negative or a ground source. We got some electrical tape and some wire stripping tool. So this is kind of a necessity if you're going to be doing this installation like I'm showing you in this video. So make certain you pick these things up if you don't have them before you begin tearing everything apart and getting into the job. All right, so now that we've covered these tools and components you're going to need, let's get to the rig and start taking it off. First things first, you're going to want to come in here and empty out any components you have in your center console. So whether it be down in our main storage compartment or if it is in our top lid compartment, you're going to want to go ahead and get that emptied out. And that's because we're going to be removing this portion of the center console. All right, next step, you're going to want to come down and find this screw location right here. You're going to have one of these screws on each side of your center console, both the driver and passenger. We're on the driver's side right now, so we're going to go ahead and get this screw removed. All right, so here's the screw on the passenger side, and same process here. Let's take it out. Next up, we're going to lift up our center console lid, and we're going to look down inside of the center console. And you probably can see mine because they look a little rusted. We've got 1 and 2 right there. We're going to get those two 10mm bolts out and free. As you can see, those are 2 snapped bolt heads, and unfortunately, they come from that location, which is where our center console bolts into. And as you can see, mine are very, very rusted out, so rusted out that they snapped. So I'm gonna have a whole nother problem on my hands, and obviously I'm gonna have to extract those threads prior to putting my center console back installed, and then we're gonna buy replacement bolts so that this center console isn't just wibbly the entire time. So yeah, that's unfortunate, but we'll have a plan. We'll get it all cleaned up. I'm going to spray some deep creep on those locations, let it start to work, and then we'll come back and address it in a little bit. So now we are ready to take out our center console, and this is the way that I always like to do it. First off, I want to lift up my lid, and then I'm going to grab right here on this trim piece, which is the e-brake / cup holder on my model, and I'm going to grab in between the e-brake and this little cubby, and we're just going to pull straight up. That's going to pop that trim piece free really easily. You can remove it, and we'll put it back here for now. And now that that's done and our screws and our bolts are undone, on my particular model, all I have left to do is lift up from the rear gently and extract the center console. So let's take this to the back and get on with the ashtray removal. All right, guys, so we are in the back of the 4Runner here, and we're ready to start taking care of this old ashtray and getting it replaced. But before we do, I kind of wanted to talk over my particular model and some differences that you guys may have. Now, as you can see, this is the 3rd gen model that I have, but some of you guys will have a model that has the rear heater controls down in this location. If you do, you're going to need to take care of that trim piece and disconnecting some of those items prior to even getting to where I've gotten right here on my removal of my center console. I apologize I can't show you that, but as you can see, my 4Runner doesn't come equipped with that model, so there's no way that I can really show it to you and give you a good example. But just know that if you have those controls, there's some additional things that you're going to need to disconnect before taking your center console out. Now, with that said, let's go over what my particular model has, which is pretty basic. We've got the awesome Toyota pull-out cup holder, and then the star of the show here, this old nasty ashtray. Now, I'm gonna tip this up for you guys to see a little bit better. And on the ashtray, as you pull it out here, you're gonna see this metal arm, and that arm is a keeper arm. So all you need to do is push down on the arm and extract the main ashtray cup. Now with that main ashtray cup out of the way, it basically exposes the base or the insert here for the ashtray. Now, in order to get this extracted, we're gonna flip this center console upside down, and we're gonna expose the inside here of the center console. Now, as you can see right down in this location here, this is where our ashtray is. This piece is the traveling portion of the cup holder that we showed you all ago. Now, this will not move out of the way. Even if you extract your cup holder, as you can see I just did there, that stays in its location. So for now, I'm just going to keep the cup holder inserted as it normally would be. Now, you may or may not have that black portion right there. That's just essentially a tape. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that tape because we need to in order to get some tabs that we need to bend back in order to pull out that insert. Now, I've seen a couple of different iterations of how these ashtray cups are made. So maybe this will help you guys out. But what you can tell here is there's this little keeper tab, this little piece right here that goes inside this slot. And if you work yourself around to the inside of the ashtray, that is where that keeper tab is. That keeper tab is attached to this outside trim piece. So this trim piece and this cup right here are two different components to this ashtray. Now, we have this piece here. We have one right up here. You can see I'm picking at it right there. And we've got one down low, which is already started kind of to be bent back a little bit. So what we need to do is we need to take, you can either take a flathead screwdriver, or as you can see, I have these pick tools that I love to use on my projects. I'll include a link in my description of the video for these pick tools. Doing it one-handed here with the camera is a bit tough, so I'm gonna have to put it back on the tripod. But what your goal is to pull this all the way straight so that it will slide out of that slot and you can disconnect the two components. So let's go ahead and start working on that. All right, we're gonna try this top first here. Okay, actually it might be better if I do pull this cup holder out because it does give me just a little bit more room to navigate right here with my hand. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go grab some long needle nose pliers, and that's so that I can flatten these tabs out. I think if you flatten that curve, it's going to be easier to separate. All right, we're back with some long reach needle nose pliers here. And these work great. Just trying to, there we go, flatten that tab. That tab has kind of a bend to it. That way it keeps this component together. So that worked nicely. Now let's go back and see what we can do here with this piece in the middle. And honestly, you know, you could probably just break these guys off. I mean, man, I'm not gonna go back with the ashtray, so I don't think I'll even need it. And if that comes down to it, we'll break them off and get it out that way. So now that we have those done, there's gotta be, there is not one, I should say. There's not one on the far side, okay? So opposite of this. So let's turn this around. And we're gonna apply some pressure to that cup. As you can see, it's already coming out. There we go. And it looks like we have just one more there. Looks like that top one is caught up. And with that top piece caught up, it's kind of jamming itself in. So let me get a better angle of it here. Funny enough, I thought this was the one that would come out easy. There we go. All right, so there you have it. The trim piece is removed. You can see those tabs now real easily there. And then we'll slide this over and extract the cup of the ashtray. All right, it's all done. Let's get her cleaned up. As always, I'm using the Meguiar's Natural Shine Protectant. Just honestly, by far, my favorite stuff to use. And we're gonna give it a good wipe down both inside and externally. All right, so back inside the cab, we have got some a bit of a mess here to address some rust spots from our bolts. And what I'm gonna wanna do is I'm gonna take that same Meguiar's cleaner that I've been using, and we're just gonna spray it down, clean the body here. I'm gonna also vacuum up, which is something I always do, just to keep this area clean underneath the center console. And when you have the console out, it allows you to get in some areas here around the brackets that you can't normally get into. So that's also an added bonus. All right, guys, so we're back on the bench, and I wanted to show you guys some of the wiring that I'm going to be doing in order to hook this up. So here we have the actual charging ports, and on the back side is our connectors. Now, the reason these are 90-degree connectors is because when they go in like this and connect to each connection point, they're pointing directly down, and that's because you don't have enough space in the center console with that cup holder that travels upwards like this, and so they have to be pointing at that angle there in order to achieve our connection point. So I wanted to show you guys that. Now, what we're going to start out by doing here is we're going to start out by using our inline fuse connector point, and I'm going to go ahead and get it crimped off to some positive wiring here, and then we're just going to strand out a long string of red wire to make sure we have enough. We can always cut it because the other side of this wire is going to be connected to one of these points here. All right, let's get to going. All right, guys, so we have our mini fuse tap here, and this fuse tap has these two locations. We're tapping into an existing 15 amp fuse location. So what we're going to do is we're going to get two 15 minis here, and we are going to place both of those 15s into our fuse tap here. Now, the reason why you have two that you're putting in is because one of these fuses is going to be to replace the fuse location that you're tapping into, and the second one is going to be for the accessory that you're adding onto, and that in this case is going to be our USB charger. So now with that said, we need to get some of this 18 gauge positive wire that we're using unraveled and tap into this mini fuse tap here. All right, guys, so I went over to the 4Runner and measured out how much wire I think I need, and I cut off about 3 or 4 feet more. So I've got about 10 foot of wire here that I have, and that's because it's always better to have more wire than less. You can't stretch a wire, but you can cut a wire. So just a good rule of thumb, okay? So with that said, we're gonna take one end of that wire, and our goal here is to splice into and connect into that right there. In order to do so, we need to strip our wire off, and this is an 18 gauge wire, so you're going to need some sort of wire stripping tool. And in this case, I have got this oldie but goodie here, and that looks like it's going to be about enough there. Now, once you strip a wire, you want to go ahead and spin the wire in a clockwise manner, and that's going to essentially get all of those copper threads spun together nice and tight. Now, with that done, you want to feed it into that hole right there. Yep. Now, nice and simple, You want to keep that steady inside. And what we're going to do is we are going to crimp down on that blue portion of that wire. Now, there's multiple ways to do this. I'm going to do it in a bit of a two-step process here. We are going to use some pliers first to start our crimp, and that's just essentially to get a little bit of a help holding that wire in that I just put. And then we're going to use some locking pliers to really apply some torque down and get that connection really firm in there. Now, you can test it by tugging on that wire and kind of see where you're at. Always a good idea to do that because you do not want any loose connections. The other thing I'll do is I will reapply some pressure here on the crimp to numerous different areas, kind of to make certain that I'm applying force at all locations that I need to. All right, now that our connection point is nice and firm and we've tested it, we've got some heat shrink tubing here that we've slid onto the open end of our 18 gauge wire. We're gonna slide it up and over our connection point, making certain that that connection point is just about in the middle. And now that it's in the middle, we're gonna take our heat gun, turn it on, and get this working. All right, now our heat shrink tubing has been shrunk onto our connection point. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some electrical tape and just close up the ends here of this tubing. All right, guys, so we have what's going to be our ground wire here cut out. And so what I'm going to start on is where we're going to actually ground it to. I have this ring terminal that I purchased, and I wanted to show you guys the bolt location that goes into the body that I'm going to use for ground. And this is how that works. That bolt just slides through, and it makes certain that this wire has connectivity and ground, but you're not wrapping that wire around that bolt like the old school used to do, and just kind of leaving it exposed, which not a fan of. So you want to make certain that you get the right type of ring terminal. They're made in all different types of sizes. And so this one's going to work perfectly for this bolt location. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same practice here by stripping our wire, feeding it in, crimping it down, and then sealing it off. All right, we're going to once again start with our strip of our wire here. Nice and easy. And we're going to go ahead and spin these wires back up. All right, now that those wires are spun in nice and tight, we're going to go ahead and insert it here into our D-ring terminal. Now, this terminal is actually rated for 14 to 16 gauge wire, and this is 18 gauge. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to strip it back a little bit further, probably twice the amount here. Okay. Now, as you can see, I'm exposing twice the amount of wire. I've got a plan for that. All right, now that twice the amount of wire is exposed, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an elbow in the wire and bend it just like that. What that does is it thickens that wire gauge, and now we're going to have more wire to stick in. Since this is rated for a bit of a thicker gauge wire, it's already holding very nicely. So now that that's there, we can take our pliers and crimp down. All right, now that it's crimped down, you want to test it out. It's definitely being held in there and it is tight. So we're going to go ahead and take our heat shrink tube and slide it around the other end. I could have done that obviously already, but it really doesn't matter. It's 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. When you don't have the other side connected, you can slide it in either direction And we're gonna put that heat shrink tube right over our connection point. Get our heat gun out, go ahead and tighten it up. All right, our heat shrink tube is on, and I'm gonna do the same thing here. I'm gonna quickly cut off some electrical tape and then just secure that connection here at the wire. All right, guys, so now our ground or our negative is all set and ready to be installed. Now, as a reminder, both of these, the positive that we wired and the negative, we're gonna go and we're gonna crimp and wire to these 90-degree connectors here once we get back into the 4Runner. All right, guys, back inside the 4Runner, and the next place we're gonna attack is the knee panel at the driver's location. And that's because our fuse tap is gonna be right here. When you remove this door, it's gonna expose all of our fuse locations on the interior of the 4Runner. And by looking at this diagram on the back of the door, you'll see ACC location, which is for accessories, and that's 15 amp. That's what we're gonna tap into today to get this done. So I'm gonna remove this and put it back over here at the driver's side seat. Now with that off, we're gonna go ahead and remove this knee panel. And that's because for me personally, in order to install this in the clean, most professional way that I can, I wanna go ahead and remove this. And it's easy. It's only 4 10mm bolts, takes no time at all. And the first one we're gonna attack is right down here in the bottom left by the kick panel. Next one's gonna be right up here to the left of the steering wheel. Next one's over here to the right of the steering wheel. And then last but not least, down on the bottom right, over the gas pedal. All right, now with those 4 bolts removed, you can simply stick your fingers right here in between the steering wheel and the knee panel and simply drop it down. Now you do want to be careful when dropping it down because you still have cables attached. I always like to drop it down and angle it a little bit to where it's kind of tucked up to the left. Now, with that exposed, we can now see not only our fuse panel over here, but a clear path and some good areas to route the wiring to be able to go back underneath and head towards the eventual end at the center console. All right, guys, so our next step is to go ahead and tap into this fuse. We're gonna take out the 15 amp fuse right here, which is for our accessory, and we're going to replace it with our fuse tap right there. Now, since I've got numerous fuse tap locations, now they're kind of stacking on top of one another. So I wanna make certain that this is seated in there really nice and firm, and it is, feels good. Now, as you can see, I went ahead and got my 1/4" wire loom here that I purchased online, and that's just because I really prefer wire loom for a clean installation. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to route it up through this connection point and down behind this panel right here. All right, so now we're ready to go ahead and route this wire back to where it's going to need to be at the back of the center console. First thing I'm going to do is pop this trim piece off around our gear shift knob, and that's because I want to be able to see underneath where I'm going to end up routing our wire. And I'm going to try to see if I can't turn this. There we go. Turn it sideways. This is the view I'm looking for right here. So now that I have that view, we're going to squat down and start to tuck and feed our wire back behind this panel piece that we discussed just a moment ago. All right, now that we have it fed through right here, there's a bit of a connection point back here that you guys can't see, but I will show you in a moment. And I'm going to feed it up underneath that connection point, which you'll understand here in just a bit. It makes more sense for the travel of the wire, and we're going to feed it through. The main goal that you always want to remember when routing wire in your vehicle is it's always best to follow any type of path that's already there for any type of wire or loom, and that's just because you know it's not going to interfere with any other components. Now we're going to feed this underneath this piece of carpet here. This surprisingly tight piece of carpet. All right, there we go. Okay, now we're gonna get some zip ties, and we're gonna zip tie this red wire here to this existing loom so that we know it's out of the way of any of our gear shift components and will not get caught. Now, we don't want it to be too taut. We want some play in our wire that we're installing. So make sure you don't get it too tight pulling from the fuse box location. All right, so we have our positive wire ran zip tied to this existing loom here. It's underneath the carpet, and it is back here to where it's ultimately going to be installed. All right, guys, so now we are looking straight down, and this is where that bracket is actually located for our center console. Unfortunately, the truth is that I'm gonna have to replace that bracket. It was actually completely rusted out in regards to those bolt locations, and I could not extract those bolts easily. So I'm just gonna buy a new one. In fact, it was so rusted, I think it's better to buy a new one with some new bolts anyway. But in order to go ahead and close up this installation until that comes in, I am gonna get the new bracket, or excuse me, the old bracket, and reinstall it and show you guys how to go ahead and ground your wire. All right, so we're gonna put our bracket back down in place here. We're gonna go ahead and thread by hand in one of the bolts there. Now on the other side, we are going to take our wire right here, and we're gonna take our bolt just like this, and we're gonna feed it into its location just like such. There we go. So now we have our positive wire and our ground wire, and we know that this is the general area as to where that USB is going to be sitting, right in this area. So we're not going to need a lot of our ground wire at all, as you can see. But what I am going to do is I'm going to kind of spool it up here and cut off an excess to make certain I don't get myself in trouble. Now, along with our positive wire here, we're going to route it underneath right in here in this channel, and I'm going to cut it off probably with about, I don't know, about 8 inches or so of space. So we're going to go ahead and do that and start wiring in our connectors for our USB power. All right, guys, so here we are, and we are ready to go ahead and put our angle connectors on. We have stripped the both the positive and the negative, and again, you strip that insulator wire off, or the wire cover, and we've exposed quite a bit of wire here. Now, I went to my local auto parts store and purchased these heavy duty angle connectors, and I'm using these. I'm not going to use the ones that were provided by TEQ. That's because one of the ones that were provided by TEQ actually broke. So unfortunately, I'm not meaning to say that that's not a good quality piece, but it did break for me, and so I had to go ahead and go to the auto parts store. So maybe you want to pick up some of these. Probably a good idea, just in case, regardless. So as you can see, it's quite a bit of a big throw here. So we're going to go ahead and cover this here. Oh, and I don't know if I've mentioned this, but I do have the heat shrink tubes that I've gone ahead and ran down the wire. So that way we can go ahead and do a heat shrink after we've made the connection. So now that this is fully seated, we can go ahead and crimp it on there. Now, one last thing, I do think it's very important. Make sure how you're crimping it on. You don't want the wire twisted up a whole lot, because you want to kind of be mindful of how it's eventually going to seat onto that piece. All right, so we've gone ahead and crimped both the top and the bottom here. and it's nice and firm seated in there. I don't believe that's going to come loose at all. I'm going to give it one more squeeze down low here, which, yeah, I don't really think I need to, but I'm going to. Better safe than sorry. There we go. There we go. There we go. All right. Now that that's done, we're going to go ahead and do the positive next. All right, there we go. So now that both of these connectors are on, we're going to go ahead and get the heat shrink tube and get that put in place. All right, guys, so our next step is going to go ahead to test our connections to make certain that everything is working before we begin installing. So we're going to go ahead and take our ground, there we go, and now we're going to take our positive. Okay, so we've got it hooked up. Let's go ahead and turn the ignition on and get a charging cable and see what happens. All right, guys, so the key is on, and as you can tell by that lovely blue glow, it's working. So I couldn't be happier. I did go ahead and get a cable and plug it in and plug it up to the phone, and the phone is charging. So this means that everything is done correctly and properly, and we are ready to go. So we're gonna go ahead and unplug it from the back to finish the installation. All right, guys, so super important PSA for installation here regarding the fuse tap. So you might remember a little bit ago, I had this pointed downward to where the blue fuses were basically resting on top of that other fuse tap. And when I went to plug in the USB, I had no power. So what I did is essentially I just pulled this out, flipped it upside down, and plugged it back in to the fuse location. And that was the trick. So apparently, pointing downward, it was too tight on this, and it wasn't essentially seating and getting a full connection inside of that fuse panel there. So that's the fix. I flipped it upside down and I had power to my USB, and essentially, as you can see, I had to route the wire a little bit curly there as we go back. So that was it. So if you guys take it this direction and you're using these fuse taps, if you don't have another fuse tap in this location like I do, then you'll be able to get away installing it where those blue fuses are pointing downward. But if you do, flip it up like this and it should work for you as well. Well, if you guys wondered how I'm going to take care of my rusted bracket for my center console, let me show you. This is an 02 4Runner that I found in my local salvage yard. So it still has the console intact. So we're going to go ahead and remove the center console and hope that that bracket underneath there is in better shape than mine. So let's get after it. Well, we're back from the salvage yard, and if you want to skip this portion of the video to specifically focus on the USB power panel, use the chapters that I've created to skip ahead, because this may not apply to your particular installation, but it applies to mine because of this problem right here. And guys, here's where I came to, right? These bolts right here snapped off. The head snapped off, and this was rusted so badly that no matter what I tried to do, aside from drilling them out, it just wasn't working. And honestly, I don't want to go through that much trouble. So at the salvage yard, there were two 3rd gen 4Runners there, but neither one of them had the same bracket, which these guys are discontinued from Toyota, so you just can't find them easily. So what I did is I found this one, which actually had some electrical components on here that I took off because I don't need all of that. And I removed the interior skin from the center console, which is this guy. This is the same part number, which is 58912-35020. And this skin is actually in really good shape, real good condition. And it has the mounting brackets on the inside or excuse me, the mounting holes that will fit the mounting bracket, obviously, because this came from the same car. Now, the skin on my 3rd Gen 4Runner has a different mounting bracket, and therefore the holes on the inside are in a different location, so it would not have been able to marry up with this bracket. So what we're going to do is we are going to clean this off. We are going to remove this skin from my center console, install this one, and then use the bracket, and we'll be all set. So not too bad of work. Let's get after it. All right, so we've got our donor completely cleaned up. I did a wash and hit it with some Chemical Guys nonsense invisible cleaner, so that's looking pretty fantastic. So we're going to sit that over to the side, and now we're going to go ahead and take care of this. And the first thing you want to do is you want to take your cup holder out, and that's pretty easy. You just extract the cup holder as if you were to use it, essentially. And there's going to be 2 screws in the back, and we're just going to remove those 2 screws. All right, next we want to remove our lid, and that's going to be these 2 screws right here up top. With the lid free, your arms can come out. Now you want to flip it up, and you're going to have 2 screws in this location right here. We got 1. And then actually the easiest way to get to this other screw is to unscrew this little cubby hole compartment. So that is with these 2 screws down here. With those 2 screws out, you can pop the cubby free. And then we've got access to this screw right here. Now we're going to flip it, and we're going to go at the side panel, and we've got 2 screws, 1 on each side, and 1 there. All right, so now you've got most of it free. We just actually need to get that cup holder out, because there's 2 screws down low that we can only access with the cup holder extracted. Well, I had to kind of pop this out off camera just because I wanted to make certain to not break anything. I had to get some weird angles, but I wanted to show you guys what I needed to do here to get this extracted. There are these tabs here and here. And basically I went inside, up underneath, compressed the tabs to where it could kind of start to pull this out from the bottom. And then when it was starting to come out from the bottom, I took my pick tool very carefully in between the trim piece here and the console and pried, and then it came out real easily. Now with the cup holder out, we can flip our console back over, and we can get to these 2 screws right down here. All right, now that those 2 screws are out, we're ready to extract our skin, and just like that, out with the old. So while we have the center console in just this condition here, we're going to go ahead and spray it down, clean it up before installing the new one. All right, so we've got everything cleaned up on our old center console, and we're ready to put our skin inside here. And so really installation is just the reverse of taking it out and removing it. So I'm not going to talk through all these steps, but we are going to go ahead and get it put back in. So the new bracket that I got from my donor vehicle actually has this 12mm bolt already kind of held in that place. So I'm going to use that. There we go. And we're going to go ahead and thread it back on. Now I'm not going to tighten it down all the way, and that is simply because I want to go ahead and put these 2 in, and these are 10mm bolts on my 4Runner. Well guys, I was so excited to get this bracket on that I forgot to put my ground wire back for the USB. So now let's go ahead and put the ground wire back. Now our next step is to go ahead and install the USB port into the billet aluminum housing. So this is where you're going to drop it in, and then we're going to take our collar here, which to me looks like it goes either way, and we're going to start to thread it on to the back. I want to make certain that you get your threads aligned properly here. There we go. Now, this is going to be moving around a lot until you get to the very end, which is when we want to check the outside to make certain that we're level. Okay. It's a little cockeyed here. This is probably going to be the toughest part of the whole installation, right? Just making sure that you get this level and tight on the back, which I think we've got it. We're gonna check it out here. I think that looks pretty good. What do you guys think? Maybe a hair off? I don't know. Looks pretty good. All right, so now that this is tightened up and we've got it where we want, we're gonna go back to the center console, finish up our installation. Well, here we are. We're ready to go ahead and install our center console back into its location. And this should be a relatively simple job. Now, while you're doing this, you want to go ahead and feed these wires, both the positive and the negative, up through the ashtray location, which the former ashtray location, which I'll show you guys here in a minute, the back end of that. Now, we've got two screw locations here, so we want to make sure that that's nice and seated. Everything looks good. Our mounting bracket, the holes line up. Man, that's awesome. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get these two screws placed in, and then get this cup holder and this little trim piece back in, put our bolts in, and go to the back and finish this job up. Man, I gotta admit, guys, I'm really proud of this job, and I'm proud of the fact that we were able to overcome a huge obstacle on these bolts that were rusted out in my old center console. So pretty cool to be able to go to the salvage yard and find these donor components and swap out the interior, and man, come to such a great resolution here, man. It's really cool. So we're gonna tighten this up and then move on to the back. One final point of maintenance, we've gone ahead and zip tied these wires together so that whenever you engage the cup holder and it travels, it doesn't actually get stuck on any of the components of the cup holder. And we're also going to try to see if we can stick some wire loom on here and have one last kind of final step of protection. Well, we've got our wire loom on here. This is actually 3/8 wire loom, and I'm super pleased with that. That's a nice clean installation. We're gonna tuck it down in there, and the final step is to essentially place this and snap it in. Now, the instructions say to apply firm pressure, and that's because there's 2 tabs on each side. Here we go. Wow. Man, what a fit. That is incredible. It looks like it was made from the factory just like that. And there it is, guys. Fully installed and successfully installed the TEQ Offroad USB power panel. Could not be happier, man. What a fantastic job. After spending some time with this in my vehicle, I am overly pleased with both the quality and the functionality of this piece. I highly recommend you guys taking the time to replace this outdated function in your 3rd Gen 4Runner with this TEQ Offroad's power panel. You will not be disappointed. Thanks so much for stopping by, and I can't wait to see you guys next time.